Hi, I'm Henry.
And I'm Ruby. Today we are here to help with a training about Atma.
As you know, this is a required yearly training, and any training you get every year can start to feel, well,
Boring.
Hopefully, with us as your guides, we can make Atma a little more fun.
Okay, Henry, what is Atma?
Atma is the Open Public Meeting Act. To put it simply, Atma requires that public business be done in public. Atma defines a meeting as the convening of a public body or specified body with a quorum present, including a workshop or an executive session. The meeting could be in person or by means of electronic communication, and is considered a meeting if it is for the purpose of discussing, receiving comments from the public about or acting upon a matter over which the public body or a specific body has jurisdiction or advisory power.
So then, what isn't a meeting?
Atma says a meeting does not mean a chance gathering or a social gathering like a birthday party or a fancy night out.
Cheers! Can you remind us what a quorum is?
Quorum means a simple majority of the membership of a public body, unless otherwise defined by law.
What do we need to review about notices and agendas?
A notice must be posted at least 24 hours in advance of meeting, posted at public body's office, and posted on the public notice website. The agenda must be posted with notice and must be reasonably specific. For example, if I said I'm going to talk about my sister, that would not be specific enough. If I said I'm going to talk about the wonderful things my sister Ruby does, that would provide enough specificity that the general public would know what to expect.
Great example, brother.
You should note that a public body must give public notice at least once a year of its annual meeting schedule.
Let's pause and see if anyone has questions or comments. Okay, now we're back. Let's talk about minutes and recordings. Those are required, right?
Yes to both. Even though there's an audio recording, the approved written minutes will be the official record. Make sure your written minutes have the date, time, and place of meeting, names of who is present and absent, substance of all matters proposed, discussed, or decided, recorded by individual member of each vote taken, name of each person who makes the public comment, and the substance of the comment, and any other information that any member requests be entered in the meeting of record or recording.
When do minutes and audio recordings have to be posted?
Pending minutes, available to public within 30 days after the meeting. Approved minutes, posted to the public notice website within 3 business days of the public body's approval. Audio recordings, posted to the public notice website within 3 business days after the meeting.
I've really enjoyed all the virtual meeting options since 2020. Can a board just do a virtual meeting?
Public bodies may meet by phone or other electronic means that allows participants to hear or observe communications. However, notice requirements still apply, and there must be an anchor location. If health or safety concerns still exist like they did during the early pandemic, this requirement may be waived.
What if a board has their yearly schedule posted, but an emergency comes up?
Atma calls that an emergency meeting, these must be due to unexpected situations. An example might be a broken water line that cannot wait for the next scheduled meeting. Failure to turn in a report on time isn't an unexpected situation.
Even though it's an emergency, try to give the best notice possible. Notify all members of the public body and have a majority of the board members approve the meeting.
Let's pause here for any questions or discussions.
Now, I'm thinking we should talk about closed meetings.
Closed meetings are very important to understand. As board members, you play an important role in building and reinforcing the bonds of trust between local government and citizens. Your job is to promote the rule of law and to foster a culture of compliance. When you perform well, you can increase the confidence in local government and provide reassurance that the government is functioning within the confines of the law.
Let's remind them, can a board just close a meeting whenever they want?
No, sis, there are very few reasons a meeting can be closed. Since they've had this training each year, let's pause and see if they can name 7 major reasons to close a meeting. According to Atma, there are more, but they apply to specific boards. How did they do? As a reminder, the 7 major reasons to close a meeting are 1. To discuss character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual. 2. To discuss collective bargaining. 3. To discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation. 4. To discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property. 5. To discuss the sale of property. 6. To discuss security personnel, devices, or systems. 7. To investigate proceedings regarding allegations of criminal misconduct.
Here are some helpful reminders about closed sessions. A quorum must be present. A motion to close the meeting must be made naming the specific reason for the closure. A roll call vote must be taken. 2/3 of the body must approve of the closed meeting.
Some of the reasons for a closed session do not require a recording, but rather a sworn statement that the purpose of the closed meeting was to discuss this issue. Others require a recording to be made, so make sure you are aware of the requirements of your purpose.
And probably the most important thing, no votes are taken in closed meetings.
Wow, Ruby, you know your stuff about closed sessions.
Henry, did you know that some things are forbidden during closed meetings?
Forbidden? What?
Yes, a board may not approve anything, interview anyone, take final action, or talk about closed sessions outside of closed sessions.
Since those things are forbidden, what happens if a person or a board violates OPMA?
A court can void any action in violation of the law. Sometimes a violation can be fixed by discussing and taking a public vote in later meeting. However, you might have to pay court costs and attorney fees. Also, those who intentionally violate or advise violations of closed meetings provisions may be found guilty of a Class B misdemeanor, which could lead to 6 months in jail or a $1,000 fine.
Yikes.
Don't worry, we've got this.
You're right. Maybe we could recap with a few simple closed session reminders.
1. Closed session is a choice. If you know the purpose is not allowable, speak up.
2. Working out differences and finding ways to get along with one another is board business, not closed session business.
3. A performance evaluation is different from a goal-setting session. Set goals in an open meeting.
4. The agenda is no place for misdirection. Make sure your board is being transparent.
5. Confidentiality is key. What is discussed in a closed session stays in a closed session.
Thanks, sis. That helps. I feel much better.
Well, I think that about wraps everything up.
Wait! Don't you think it'd be better if we end with a game?
Actually, yes. What are you thinking?
Board members, can you fill in the blank? Make sure you give blank our notice.
The answer is 24.
Your agenda items need to be blank.
Specific.
Closed meetings are only for blank purposes.
The answer was allowable.
Receive training on OPMA blank time per year.
1.
Approved minutes must be posted within blank days.
The answer is 3.
When in doubt, consult your blank counsel.
Legal. Wow, great job, board members.
I can tell this is a very smart group.
Thanks for doing OPMA training with us. See you next year.
It's great. Good for you for finding all those places too, Marie, to film them and take all that time.
The one,
It took much longer than that.
the one behind bars and the police car behind it. I don't know how you got that footage. That's great. So, yeah.
But it's important that we have that training, and it is because we're doing the public's business that we want to do it in an open, allowable way that we take care of it. So it's good for us to have the training every year, and always Ms. Stevenson reminds us when it's that time, and we so appreciate it. So thank you that we can have that training and move forward. Thank you all. Unless there's other discussion or questions about Open Public Meeting Act. All right, we're ready to move then to a discussion and action item. State Charter School Board Accountability Framework. And so Executive Director Kramer will, and this other members of the staff ready to go,
Yeah,
will provide an update on the progress that they presented for us. We've had that presentation prior. And I thought a lot about those presentations since last time we met. So pleased with the work that everyone's been doing. So,
Great.
all right.
Thank you, Chair Bowles. And I'll start, and then our team who you know and they shared their great work in the September board meeting and kind of an update to it. Vice Chair Phillips, I'll need your help with one thing. It's the Latin pronunciation of the word that I have there. But one of the things, and it's coming up, Assedere.
Where are we?
It's right third.
Just Assedere.
Sidere.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that we gleaned from the board meeting, we had a lot of input, right? A lot of it was complimentary, move forward, and these things. But one of the things that we did here is let's clearly state the reason or the purpose or the vision of the work that we're putting forward. I think Chair Bowles, you summarized that, and several board members mentioned that. We think we did a pretty good job talking about the statutory obligations and the board rules, trying to show the linkage between, those things we have to do statutorily, those things that board rule, that's capital B board rule, has us required to do. But the vision and the purpose and the reason is so much more than that. And I took 2 years of Latin, but I didn't know how to pronounce the word, which is unfortunate. But one of the takeaways was assessment, which is close to evaluate. It's not the same as evaluate, but for me anyways, as a Latin student, it was close. And the root for assessment is assidere. And assidere means literally to sit alongside. And I think that for me already in high school, when I took the courses, and then when I taught courses to college students that were preparing to be teachers, yes, I taught at a student prep program and oversaw one at a university, but we referred often to the words evaluation and assessment, and it almost felt like so heavy, right? It almost felt like so, in many ways, punitive. And when you come back to the Latin root of assidere and to sit alongside, the evaluation, as we've had visuals from our team present and as we've thought it through, the evaluations are there to truly sit alongside our operators. They're truly there to support. Inform is in between because you evaluate, you inform, and then you support. And so we wanted to present to this board that our burning desire for this work is not just to meet statutory obligations and board rules, although that is a primary objective of doing this, a proactive way. But we really believe that when we have frameworks in place, that we then have the opportunity to employ our oversight model. And so just wanted to share out that reason, purpose, vision, again, for our board, because we thought that you wanted to hear that. Another thing that we had heard is just what will we evaluate? And I think that in this work, there's so many details, and we bombarded this board with so many details in the September board meeting that if we just simplify it, and that was another guidance and direction that we got from this board, is try to simplify things wherever you can. And if you could go back to the other slide real quick, Lisa, and it's just what will we evaluate? The word framework is embedded in the title of this work. It's called the Accountability Framework Singular. And for us, when we talk about framework, that is the singular that sets the stage for 3 plural frameworks. And so the frameworks are the academic, the operations, and the financial. And so how do we know what we're evaluating? It's based on our framework, which encompasses 3 very specific frameworks. And so our team has really been working with even little letters like this in singular and plural so that we can best create policy, which is what we're going to present to the board today. But then also, once the policy is in place, we're empowered to work with our operators and say, look, if you want to know what you're evaluated on, look to our framework, of which there are 3 frameworks. And then this is representative. Each is going to present today on the specific frameworks. And so that's one part of our accountability framework, and it's what we're evaluated on. True to evaluation leads to support, the accountability part of this title, accountability framework, is really our oversight model. And one of the things that we were really fortunate with our work is that when we reviewed as staff, and you may take a look at it today as well, but we think that our oversight model has really proven to serve us well as a board and as a staff. When you look at it, it provides a notice of concern. We now have a letter of awareness that comes before a notice of concern. It says when we're going to involve our board, and that's going to be at the place where we place on warning, right? And so there is an opportunity to move. I'm doing this pyramid thing because later on in the presentation, I'll just refer us to the pyramid of the oversight model with ultimately potential closing. But when you take a look at these two words, accountability and framework, they encompass what we evaluate, which is our framework made up of 3 frameworks, and then it encompasses our oversight model. That was very strategic and deliberate and intentional with what the Institute also wanted us to do. They thought that it would be really good to now at this time morph these two things, smush these two things together. We don't need to have separate frameworks and then over here have the oversight model. The frameworks, the evaluation leads to the oversight, and our oversight is all about sitting alongside our operators. That's our purpose, and that's how we provide support. My part is not much longer, and then I'll turn it over to our great team. But if we just turn to the next slide for now. And I'll just say that the other thing that we really took good care of, I think, in the policy, we're going to review the policy together after each of our presenters on each of the frameworks individual. But we do have in here a lot of ties to our State Charter School Board bilateral agreement. And so, yes, there's law. Yes, there's board rule. Yes, there's a lot of purpose because it's who we are, is that we want to come alongside and support. But ultimately, we also want to tie to that bilateral agreement. That's done in a couple specific ways. One is that our frameworks are in the policy. And when we review the policy today, which I want our board to walk through and go through, you're going to see in there a URL which doesn't link to the frameworks yet because we want your input today on our continuation of the frameworks that we're doing. However, the oversight model, we can link and get over there because as I've just shared with you, to our view, it's served us really well. And we encourage our board to continue to use the oversight model that we have in place rather to reinvent it at this time. And then also the bilateral agreement has a lot of language like evaluation. It has a lot of language like support. It talks about minimum performance standards, and it talks about unique performance measures. So when we turn our attention away from this, the kind of update on the frameworks, and we look at the policy, because that's what we're going to do today, just know that we've tried to be good caretakers of tying it to our bilateral agreement. And so I think at this point, it's just a really nice pause to get presentations on the updates to the frameworks. We'll come back to our policy. We'll come back to our oversight model, but we're not quite done with our frameworks because we've had some additional work on our how do we measure these things, and it's our frameworks. So I'm going to pause, turn the presentation over to our awesome team. There'll be time for questions after we present, just like last time for input from you, because we're learning a lot through this process. I gave you like 3 more windows too, than I, Lisa. I think first up is which one? Academic? All right. Yeah. And this is the same order as September. I think we put it in the same order. So academic, we'll move into financial and then operations third. And these are relatively brief, I believe, team. Yep. Allowing, yep. Good.
Okay, so thank you for letting me give this a small update on the academic performance framework from our presentation in September. Just as kind of a setting the stage and the context here, I'm going to read our purpose as we've kind of outlined in the documents for the policy, which says the academic performance framework evaluates the impact of charter schools on student educational outcomes. It utilizes a combination of USBE percentile rankings, mission-specific goals, and alternative assessments to create unique performance measures. The framework evaluates the academic strengths and weaknesses of charter schools and identifies areas for CSB collaboration and support. Just as a small review, we've kind of developed 3 pathways for schools to choose from. We have a little bit of an idea, or we have an estimation of how many, or the percentage of schools that will choose each one. And we feel like this gives schools a good option to share their stories. We also talked last time that for pathways 1 and 2, it's a combination of USBE's percentile rank data, as well as a bonus based on the growth designation or a mission-specific goal. Just as a reminder, 2 things to remind. The percentiles that you're seeing here are based on USBE's framework, which has weighted values for proficiency, growth, graduation rates, etc. And then the criteria, or the 80th percentile, 40th to 80th, 20th to 40th, and 20th and below, those are industry charter authorizing standards. We don't have to follow that. That was just the standards that have been used in other authorizers. So the big thing that needed to happen between when I last saw you this month was a meeting with USBE. And we had some very specific questions for them related to their future plans with their academic framework. We had some questions about their growth model, which they changed ever so slightly for 2024. And we wanted to make sure that our assumptions of their model were true. What we were assuming that they were doing was true, and so we needed to talk that out with them. And Marie can attest that about 5 minutes before we were going to present to USBE, that meeting got canceled. No, just those, that's the way life goes. So we haven't had a chance to meet with USBE to go over some of our burning questions, and we'll get connected with them very soon. But the thing that did happen since I last saw you is that USBE did release their school report cards for 2024. And this actually gave us some insight and direction to take. I just want to say as a blanket statement, again, I just carefully say that I don't speak for USBE in any way, but looking over the school report cards, there was many good things that came from the report card. Proficiency was up across almost every single category of subject and high school and elementary. Proficiency was up, graduation rates were up. The early literacy program and students reading on grade level was up. That was also sent out as a press release from USBE earlier. So lots of good things are happening. But the one thing that happened that truly affected our work, or quote unquote, my work in this latest phase, is that growth for the state was 10% down across the board. Wow. So we have to talk about that because that is really important for what we just talked about last month in terms of using growth as our kind of anchor of a bonus. But it turns out that this is because of statistics. And if you just would give me a couple minutes to explain it, because I think it's pretty relevant to our conversation. So their growth model uses what happened the past year for students, makes a prediction of where they would be the next year. The pandemic dropped performance tremendously. So the model thought that growth would drop as well. But then the students just took off. and they were allowed to grow. And as they grew, the model expected them to grow at higher and higher rates. But in 2024, the model expected them to grow at rates that were unrealistic. And so a lot of schools did not meet their growth targets, or individual students did not meet those growth targets. Those growth targets weren't very realistic. I hope that makes sense. It's a statistical thing. It's not that the students in Utah did not grow. That is not the case at all. Now, again, not speaking for USBE, I'm sure USBE will have their own interpretation. And it's one of the questions we have for them to meet with them, but it does affect the model. So if you look at the center there, in 2023, we had 90% of our schools receiving an exemplary growth designation. And for school year 2024, only 18%. Now, of course, it was never going to be 90%. It was never going to continue that high, but I didn't anticipate such a significant drop. And what this did for the framework is that it put 27% of our schools in 2023 in that review and active engagement, up to 43% of our schools in the review and active engagement. And one of the key things that I heard in our last meeting was, are you sure you have the capacity to do this work? I remember very clearly that question. And when we start getting into the 43% of schools in our review and active management or active engagement, that is perhaps a question that we need to really think about. So in some ways, although we didn't meet with USBE, I'm trying to put a bright spin on this. Actually, it might have been perfect because now we have some better questions to ask them as we go forward. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So going back to the pathways, I still believe, and I think our group, as we've talked through, we still very much believe in 3 pathways to give our schools options into how they best can show their performance. But there's a couple ideas floating around. Number one is that with pathway number 1 in our growth designation, and we said we were going to use exemplary, maybe we just need to let this ripple of the pandemic work itself out, right? Because this year's growth will then influence next year's predictive models. Maybe we just need to be patient, or maybe we need to add commendable growth, because commendable is again above the typical that USBE sees. And if we added commendable or exemplary growth as honoring their work, perhaps that is a more fair way to allow students to choose pathway number 1. But the third thing, and Dr. Kramer brought this to my attention, I thought it was very insightful, is that because there's the 3 pathways, maybe schools push more to pathway 2 than we had intended originally. And we're giving them the option to use the mission-specific educational outcomes as that bonus. And so maybe schools will choose that more than we anticipated, but it's perfectly reasonable for them to do so. So that's kind of where we are. We still need to meet with USBE. We still have some work to do there, but that's kind of the major insight that I wanted to share this particular presentation with you. So just as a final here, these are the 4 things that are on our mind here. We still need to collect stakeholder input on the academic framework, and we're talking about school operators. We do need to collaborate with USBE. We were on the docket for that meeting, and we'll get on the next one. We want to make sure that our growth designation parameters make sense for us. And there is a small conversation happening about the percentiles. Standards are below the 20th percentile is active engagement. Perhaps we need to reevaluate that. There's no set standard for that. And then lastly, we want to eventually be ready to put this to the public comment for the academic framework. So that's just a short little update on the academic. If you have any questions, happy to answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and I think I probably should have asked this last time, or it might have been in your previous presentation. So I apologize if this is just, you know, a spongy head question. But you know, as I've watched charter schools kind of evolve after their initial authorization, or even if they're in their second decade, sometimes serving different students than they had originally conceived of serving. with different needs and also different kind of outcomes, academic and otherwise. I'm just wondering, as I think about that, I'm wondering whether the choice of a pathway is kind of a one and done and is reflected in the agreement, or if that is something that they work with you on annually. That would seem to be kind of ridiculous, but maybe it isn't. Maybe that's it. When I say ridiculous, I mean very labor intensive. Or is it something that they come back and negotiate as there's evolution or change or differing needs that the school has, and saying, what we really are focusing on is this, and we're having great success, but this is probably something you ought to measure us by that we didn't realize before. So I just wondered if that was kind of a one and done, or if a change required, or if a change required a new agreement or new sort of exhibit A type thing, whatever we're calling that now.
So first off, your question is excellent. It's very, very top of mind. It's been brought up almost every single time we've met as an internal team. There was some robust conversations about where this would live. Because like you, the charter agreement would maybe have made sense prior to some changes, and then it was purposefully left out and moved into policy, which then filters down. I don't have a great answer for you in terms of where it will eventually live, but it is something that we've been talking about, that this is probably not. And I think your feedback is important, because it shouldn't be a one and done, because schools change and their goals may change, their mission specific, the way that they're the way that they're showing their success may change as they evolve as a school, when they're first authorized to their 10-year, 15-year, 20-year mark, as you described, and therefore it wouldn't make sense to make it in their charter agreement. And I think other board members have referenced that we don't want to make that a burdensome process, as well as they adjust to meet the needs of their students.
Glad you used the word process. May I just elaborate on the process? Can you go back one slide, please? And for us, we've, as a team and as a board, we've used the word process, which to us encompasses three things: policy, procedures, and forms related to that. And so today, if you look at that fourth quadrant, that lower right, public comment on academic framework, that's actually, we think, a procedure aspect. And then your question as to how often do you choose one of these pathways is a procedural question. And today we really are hoping that we can focus in on the policy and get the 30-day clock ticking on that, piecemeal it a little bit, and then let this work of the USBE meetings, let kind of where it lives kind of settle, and any other procedural or form related things. So I think it's kicking the can for 30 days. It's about what we're thinking.
I just have a follow-up
Yep.
comment, if that's okay. I don't have any heartburn over it at all, because I think all of your pathways allow us to make an evaluation on the school, right? So it's not as though one is better than another, or they're just different lens and similar. They have overlap, right? Looking at the school's progress. So I don't really, it's entirely procedural in that regard, because you're sort of holding an appropriate bar when you think about what law requires, as well as what we hope from our authorized schools, and in terms of the unique things that each brings, but the minimum standard. So, it's not that I'm saying, one is better than two and two is better than three, as much as just, my guess would actually be, when you're looking at procedure, even though we're not necessarily, is that most schools would stick with the pathway they chose. That's where their comfort zone is. That's where their mission is. I don't think this is going to be people just madly whooshing from one to the other over the years, but there will definitely be that as well in a group. And I just, as you said, want to make sure that they can do that, changing. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to focus on the changing needs of their population, and actually recalibrate kind of where they're putting their resources and time for that population, right? So, you know, that's just a comment, but this is very clarifying, so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Additional question. Do you, for Brenda? You've taken, thank you for using the feedback we provided last time and coming to a strength. And knowing there's still some questions that you need to answer that you would like answered, both from USP, from potential other stakeholders who will use the system prior to that public comment. I know you'd like to get moving on all of this, right? All right,
Lisa,
do you want to hear all three
Yeah,
before we take it?
that'd be great. Lisa represents the financial framework. She's the lead on the financial.
Sorry about that little lag. Okay. So, yes, my work that I'm gonna discuss with you today is short framework. I just wanted since our last board meeting. So, I have a similar thing to share with you. It has to do with the financial framework spoke. Similar to what Randy did. It says the financial performance framework evaluates whether a school is financially stable and able to fulfill the obligations outlined in its charter agreement. The financial performance framework includes 6 primary and 2 secondary performance indicators focused on short-term liquidity, long-term sustainability, and fiscal management. So we use the financial framework to help us evaluate, identify, and support. So this is the one we're going to focus the most on today. This is basically we had in our last meeting, we showed you 10 metrics that we were evaluating. And then we took the feedback that we got from this group and we had a finance committee meeting. And through the work of that finance committee meeting, we took some things out, we added some things. And so I'm just going to go over this with you really quickly. So there were 4 metrics that we decided to take out. We did this based on making it simple, as we wanted to do that, and just we tried to pick which were the ones that helped us the most, and the other ones just kind of let go of. Because we're, like I said, to keep it simple. So those 4 that we let go of, you can see in the blue boxes, they're crossed down would be current ratio, enrollment variance, delta, asset, and cash flow. Then we added 2 new ones. The new ones are at the bottom there on the left and right side. They're the facilities ratio and the salaries and benefits ratio. And then also for audit findings, we added the word material to that. So when we do look at material audit findings, and that's going to be a little different right now too, but I'll explain that later. But I just wanted you to know, we did add material to that, and we added facilities ratio and salaries and benefits ratio. And then the 2 that are in purple, which again, the material audit findings and the debt default, we decided to take those 2 off the dashboard. Again, for simplicity's sake, but we're not taking them off the table. There's still things we're going to look at. They're just going to be that secondary level that we're going to look at those 2. So by the end of it, instead of 10, we had 6 and 6 primary, 2 secondary, and we still left the meets, doesn't meet, and how we're evaluating the schools for those different categories. And then the work in progress on this one. We are working on getting it operationalized. We're still working on that. Part of it is because we're making sure that this looks good to you and this is where we want to land before we do any more work on it. So that's where we are. We have a couple of them. We're still working on the source for. We've made some progress on that, but it's not 100% there yet. And then once we get all that, we want to engage with the schools to let them know what work we've done and what it could potentially look like after this 30-day public notice that we still need to go through as well. And that's all I have for you on that one today.
Any additional questions?
Oh, and I sorry, terribles, but I was wondering if maybe Clint, as representative of the finance committee, wanted to add anything.
No, I think that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, I'm so sorry.
No, that's all right. I was just gonna say, thank you for taking that feedback. It looks more manageable and more direct and exactly what you need to know. It's now appearing there for you to see quickly what you need to look at. Anyone else? No?
If you could, oh, sorry.
If you would go back to that graph, I'd love the change you made, thank you. I'm just curious, in the backup to that graph, I'm assuming that each of those has a clear definition and as the calculation and everything. So like, since salaries and benefits ratio is new, you're looking at that just as the total percentage of their allowable cost and budget, right? Like 99% of their budget.
Or
We'll work there.
or 1%.
You and I both.
They would be understaffed.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Love it.
I just have one little quick comment, please. What I like about this framework you put together here is that I think that it will also resonate with our charter schools. They won't feel as though they're being dinged for something that doesn't really matter and give you pushback. They'll understand if they are yellow flagged for something here, even if they can explain it, because they understand that's an important metric. I think it's aligns it. And then of course, they will know that if there's a not meets on some of these, that it's a huge red flag. So what I love is that the conversations, the sitting together won't be spent arguing the value of that metric, because these are valuable metrics, and anybody who is running a charter school should know that, right? Or the teams running it should know that. So I think this is going to just make your facilitate the most productive and kind of collaborative kinds of conversations, because there's just not argument there. We've chosen the most important one. So kudos. That's good. That's a good framework.
Thank you.
Could you go to the last slide before the thank you slide? I just have one quick comment. It won't take me long before Smriti. And it's just the 30-day public notice is part of the procedures and part of the future. We'll show you a timeline and kind of like, what we're thinking right now, because we do have some work for our board to consider and potentially take motion on today. And that's the policy, which lays the groundwork for the procedures and for the forms. So when it's referenced here, 30-day public notice in the previous academic framework presentation, or here, and you're going to see it again in the operational, it's referring to not a 30-day public notice now, but a 30 public date notice potentially 30 days from now after the policy potentially is approved. Just a matter of clarification. So.
Member Cisneros, did you have your hand up too? No. All right, I just click on this. If someone did. All right, not seeing any more. Ready to Smriti.
You're good.
Again, good afternoon, everyone. So this is after our respective presentations last month, based on you guys' feedback, went back and just did some work since then. So just wanted to update you guys since what happened since then, how far we've come along. So the first slide here, again, talking about the purpose of the operational framework, and you will, when Paul will present it, the policy itself, you can see it's coming directly out of the policy. and it refers to the operational performance framework, evaluates the performance of schools and boards in meeting essential statutory and contractual obligations. And it includes 4 key performance indicators: the board's adherence to legal requirements and compliance with charter agreement, the board's oversight responsibilities, compliance of the school with relevant laws and charter agreement, and ensuring a safe environment for students, staff, and families. So moving on to the next slide. So this one talks about the strategic pillars that make up the operational framework. And the first one, again, being the purpose, which is, the purpose of the framework, which is to act as a powerful tool for evaluating, identifying, sharing, and supporting various aspects of schools operations. And again, the framework will allow SCSP to proactively identify and address potential areas of concerns in accordance with its statutory obligations and each charter school's charter agreement. And again, I would like to reiterate that operational framework is intended to be objective with the goal of minimizing administrative burdens to SCSP authorized schools. And lastly, the framework focuses on performance, not compliance, and is not intended to be punitive, but instead provide a basis for an assessment and dialogue for improvement. Moving on to the next slide. So the process, so after our meeting last month, we went back, met amongst the internal framework team here, and went through the just combined and eliminated a few of the measures, because we wanted to keep it as simple as possible to the extent possible. So, and then again, analyze some of the source data tools that we had, sorry. Okay, and in the process, the measure that got eliminated is, this is one of the measures that were eliminated. So it reads as the governing board's bylaws and nonprofit articles of incorporation are accurate and meet the requirements of Utah state law. And the reason we decided to take this one out is because it's expected that schools would follow the requirements of Utah state law because it's part of the new school application package. So, we would expect our schools to be following the rules, and, this is something we thought we would be, not having to spend time looking into and making sure that they are meeting the requirements. And moving on to changes made. So basically these 4 measures down in the second row here all relate to OPMA, like board meetings are properly noticed, decisions of the boards are made during open meetings, and board minutes are made available on the website. And the last one, all governing board members have participated in annual training. So, we thought of bringing that under the umbrella of the OPMA compliance, because these all are part of OPMA. So, so that change has been made since then. Okay, and moving on, what's left to be done. So again, this has to be procedurized, and UCAP infrastructure has to be, developed surrounding this. Also, annual assurance checklist has to be developed. And again, 30-day public notice, just focusing on the framework procedure that needs to happen sometime in future once, we decided on the policy today. So, okay, happy to take any board questions. Thank you.
Questions, board members? Thank you for simplifying also. By simplifying, it just really focuses and gives us a more of a laser focus. Schools know what the expectation is, and we do. And you can always evolve as you need to into the future. And this can be a strategic, a dynamic process. But at this point, that gives us really a clear communication tool. So thank you all, 3 of you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Great. If you could go back 1 slide, and then I have maybe 5 or 10 minutes more, and then this agenda item will potentially close out. And so that 30-day public notice for this framework is a little bit, it's not today, it's maybe 30 days from today. So very soon, we're going to turn our attention to discussion and potential motion for today, which is a policy, which really sets up the work that this great team is doing. So I just wanted to say that one more time. And if you could turn to the Word document, which is in fact the policy, what I'd like to do is just highlight. In fact, this document is highlighted. And just, I hope that you see some of the elements of how it connects to, to our bilateral agreement, how it connects to board rule, how it connects to our purpose. And I'm hoping that you see those things in here. If you can make it just a little bit larger and allow me to just do that highlighting. It's called the accountability framework. That is exactly what it's called right now, which is very good. Yes.
May I just ask,
Please.
I'm not sure where to sit it to ensure that people can see it. Can you all see it if I'm here? Or do I need to move to here?
Maybe a second chair.
And make it a little bit bigger even.
Maybe I'll just assume that they can't see.
Yeah.
Just
And maybe yeah.
I just want to make sure right where I'm sitting is like the line of sight. So
So it's called the accountability framework. That's exactly what it's called now. So there's if the board chose to take a motion to put a 30-day notice into motion today, then in fact, it would be called the same thing, which helps with our agreement and other things like that. We've already broken down that accountability refers to the oversight model and that we're using the same oversight model that we've used for how many years. It's intact. It works in practice. It works and so it works for us. The framework then becomes the plural frameworks. You can see that the purpose definitely is established in code. And so that's why I've highlighted that. Moving down just a little bit, and you can read in between my highlights, of course. I'm just trying to highlight some things. We are careful to talk about our processes as including policy, procedures, and forms. That's the way that we speak about it. And today, this is the policy, not the procedures and forms. Sometimes we give the board an entire process. At this time, because of the complicated nature and some meetings still need to be had, we thought we could piecemeal this and present a policy for a potential 30-day notice. In addition to an overarching purpose, each one of those frameworks has a purpose later on. And so the purpose, you can see support is there in several places, the code, the board rule, the exact language regarding minimal standards, and some other references, things that we just need to have in a purpose. Scrolling down, and this is not a long policy. We just think, and the Institute supported us in our crafting of this policy. This policy establishes transparency that consists of 3 performance frameworks. And so you've now kind of compartmentalized our overall singular framework into those 3 different parts. And then it doesn't hurt for us to keep remembering that we've pushed in the oversight model into this policy. So instead of having 2 separate policies, one be related to the frameworks and the evaluation, and the other being related to support, which is what oversight is, that it's all encompassed. The next parts here talk about evaluation and the corresponding support. Something that you've probably have seen a couple different times now is, the evaluation, the information, and then the support. Scroll down just a little bit. And these are all familiar because each one of the presentations just encompassed that in their own presentations. Brendan read the academic purpose and so forth. And so that's the exact language that you were just presented. And we thought that that was good to summarize, to simplify, to give like a capture of the essence of each one of these specific frameworks. And so that we've done this policy.
just a quick question.
Yeah.
I'll defer to those who are in the know much more than I am. Member Biesinger, Smriti, Lisa, is for the financial, that preliminary, what does it say? Assessment. Is October the best month for that? Do you have access to the data you need in October rather than say November with the audited financials?
So, the data is due on October 1st. So,
Okay, good. I just want to make sure we weren't tying hands. Okay,
Does that indicate that data? Oh, good.
up there, sorry. Just says the preliminary financial framework assessment will be completed in October. And I know you have your October 1 accounts there, but what I was worried about is the audited financials.
Sure.
Yeah,
I just covered, are you gonna use UPass data?
Yeah.
As opposed to.
Okay,
audited
okay,
financials,
perfect. Thank you. That's
Which is
what I needed to
probably
hear.
more accurate.
It
than
is,
your
yeah,
audited
you're
financials.
probably right about that.
Okay.
Certainly for our purposes, certainly for our purposes. I think.
And we heard in several meetings, I don't know which, it was with the bonds, but our board was very intent on us being very proactive on the financial. And we always had the lag of the audits. And so I think this is
Yeah,
the opportunity to get
that's
ahead of it
true.
a little bit.
Okay, good. I feel really good about that. Thank you.
So those are the purposes of the framework components. Scroll down if you can. The oversight model, that link takes you to what might be familiar for some of you, and there might be a little bit of editing to it, but overall it's a pyramid triangle. I don't know if it's easy to pull it up or not. Lisa, if it isn't easy, that's okay. Yeah, let's not do a minute. Let's just, that is reference to current policy or current model, our oversight model, which gives us the structure. Yeah, you have it here. Gives us the structure and how we interact with operators once they've been evaluated, and we know that we want to provide some support for them. And so the idea, and it was a robust conversation as well, is instead of putting all that detail into a policy, to instead incorporate a URL, and then we can always make procedures out of the oversight model and make those changes. And therefore, the URL remains intact and the policy remains intact, but the details behind it, we still being worked on, right? So we can't, so that's how that went down. And so then the authorizer oversight, I'm nearly done. Performance framework seek to provide objective variable indicators was used a lot in the agreement. Scrolling down, the charter school oversight model details the process that we take to do some of the things. It's a short, concise policy. I don't know if the URL was highlighted. If you could go up one more time, and it says model URL underneath responsibilities. That's where the specifics for the performance, for the frameworks will be located. So similar to the oversight model, there'll be the specific frameworks underneath that model URL. And so it's a similar approach. I will totally turn it back over to you, Chair Bowles, but I think a timeline is important for the board. So we're going to go back to the PowerPoint, a suggested motion, and then to you, Chair Bowles. So thanks for allowing a lengthy.
The right thing is for as much, all those little details not to be in the policy, so the policy can remain consistent.
Correct. That is right.
So that is a wise decision. So those details fall somewhere else. You have to balance with, I even wondered if we'd say that relative to October and say in the autumn or in the third quarter of the year or the fourth quarter of the year, or something like that. But October may be maybe exactly right. And that's not going to adjust ever. So at any rate. So
here's our accountability framework timeline. We're in the October meeting. We've presented policy just now. I highlighted some parts of the policy. Board members have that policy, and we presented policy for a review, a final review. It's short. We would like to begin the 30-day public notice for this policy. That is a request, but it's up to you, board. We're okay at whatever you lead us, we will go. And then we also presented the progress on the framework, which includes 3 specific frameworks. And so we've tried to distinguish between that. Looking ahead then, in November, we will incorporate your board feedback that we've just received today. We're dedicated to continue to incorporate it. We've gotten some. We'll incorporate input from the 30-day notice for the policy, that is, if in fact that's the choice of our board. We'll present a final draft of the academic, financial, and operational frameworks, because they're all in process, different iterations, couple more meetings, but they're getting there. And then we'll begin the 30-day public comment and period for the frameworks, which is the procedures and the forms. And that allows us to potentially get done in December and in January, although we don't have to push. We want to get it right and we don't have to go fast. But it does present a nice timeline for us to incorporate board feedback from November, to incorporate input from the 30-day notice, to seek board approval for everything in December and in January. So kind of finalizing all this stuff in December or January would be a goal. So we have a suggested motion that reads almost identical to last September meeting. That's on the next slide. You know, there's a little leg. The thing that's new is that at this time after review, the State Charter School Board Accountability Framework policy can be added to the 30-day public notice with final draft of the frameworks to be presented at the November board meeting. Ultimately, this will lead to adopting of the new State Charter School Board Accountability Framework in December 2024 or early 2025. The rest of that language is very similar. It's consistent with what you took a motion and gave us direction to do, which is keep doing this work. And I turn it to you then, Chair Bowles.
So my question, do we need to look at, I mean, it gives everyone specific things to review, but do we need to look at the policy and the framework separately? You'd like to look at
We
them
would.
separately as opposed to looking at the whole picture at one time.
That was our suggestion. The policy with a 30-day notice started, like the clock started on that one. It gives us the opportunity to meet that December, January, and the policy will establish a lot of the procedures. We would feel good, solid board movement with an approved policy first. We've thought it through, and that's kind of the direction we're going.
Questions, anyone? Concerns? Do we have a motion? Yes, motion. All right. You can say so moved. That's what.
I would like to make a motion presented to us, or I don't want to read it. I just want to, I'm happy to make a motion to support that. Suggest the motion.
All right. So a motion to support the suggested motion language. Do we have a second to that motion? And a second. So motion from member Biesinger and a second from member Cisneros. Any further discussion relative to that motion? All those in favor, sing them. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. And that was unanimous. There was no one opposed. Thank you so much for your work, team, and coming to that place. And does that mean then, Brendan, the only thing I would have asked if you would have wanted to do them together more is that you'll continue, like in your recommendation, you're going to reach out to stakeholders and ask for their input about some of those frameworks in addition to the policy as well during the next while. So we have that feedback and before you go to the full 30 days. For that, the frameworks. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you all. That's huge work. You've been working. This looks simple, like it was just, oh, here's something. But we know you've been working hours and hours and hours and lots of discussion and work and revising to come to this point, even from the time we met last, and you've done a lot of work prior to that. So thank you. It really is going to be good for all of the schools in the state. So thank you so much. And ultimately for our children, that's what we care about. So thank you so much. All right. So we're ready to move on to our next discussion, which is, I'm just looking to see how close we are.
What time do we end? 2:30?
2:30, but we're
Yeah, we're
getting
pretty close.
Discussion and action from core processes. The action item core processes. So Executive Director Kramer.
Yeah, and I think it's a co-presentation with myself and Associate Executive Director Stephenson. I think the first couple of slides, we can even move a little quicker because they provide a lot of context for this work. It's driven by our professional development in Traction, which is something that we've shared with you as a team professional development endeavor. Core processes are fundamental steps a business takes to achieve its goals. They are the backbone of a business and they are the playbook for how it operates. You want this one?
Sure. So for some background understanding, about 80% of the results that a business or an organization sees would be the results that come from 20% of the causes, is the philosophy or the idea of the core processes. So as we're talking about core processes, we are wanting to determine which of our common routines create the most value for our organization. And one of the reasons there is that when everyone then is understanding and following the same processes, that uniformity eliminates frustration. It helps to reduce mistakes. And also, and I think this is my favorite one, frees up the team to focus on innovation and problem solving.
Awesome. With the next slide, how to identify your core processes. You identify some main areas of your business operations. It includes everything from how we provide services, to how our team operates and how customer service is handled. Most businesses have 8 to 14 core processes.
So then once you have figured out what those are, then documentation is the next step. And one of the keys in Traction is that simplification is a very important part of that. And so you're not just writing down a series of steps, but trying to create simple checklists or ways to document that can be easily understood and followed by anyone. They recommend 1 to 10 pages as you're documenting, but as close to the 1-page mark as you can get. A few other key reminders from Traction as you are documenting. We want to make sure that we're clearly defining roles within our processes, talking about who's accountable for what, where responsibility lies, if there's performance metrics or measures that are needed along with those processes, that's outlined, as well as any protocol for resolving an issue that could come up within that process.
So we definitely know that we need some training, and that's why we're doing the Traction training. Then measure, manage, and update the documented process. We do have some great processes that are out there, policies that are out there, but we should really just review them and we should make sure that we're using them. Like we just said, the oversight model, we're using it. Like that's how we conduct our business, and it's proven to be really good. There's different formats that are described, maybe short video explanations that we can use for our operators. If in fact, as an authorizer, these are some processes that help our operators do their work. Regular training sessions and open communication channels are the key to successful implementation.
And then, lest you think that that's where it ends, Traction points out that this is forever work.
Thanks a lot, right?
So continuous, it's a journey, it's never a destination. And so making sure that as a team, we recognize that we have the ability and the tools that we keep cycling through the core process, essentially. That we continue to train, measure if it's effective, manage, where do updates need to be made, make those updates, and then continue processing and forever moving forward.
What's really exciting is that today we want your engagement for the time that we have remaining to help us identify and prioritize the core processes of the State Charter School Board. And so that's where we're asking for your help. Marie and I as the leadership, and then as a full team, we actually did analyze a lot of our current processes or processes that we might need. We've created a little visual as to where we're at now. The visual just is a launch place for you. You can add or subtract or move it from one column to the other column. But prioritization would be very helpful for us, because in your prioritization, we know, hey, we can let go of that process for a little while. This one is really important to our board, and then that would give us some guidance. And then you can direct us to document and report back at the November board meeting. Maybe we clip off one of our processes and we say, hey, here's one to present as one of our forever journeys. We may always have a process that we're giving to our board to review, manage, things like that. So we're excited about what our team came up with here. We put it into two columns. Do you want to speak to this, Marie, or should I keep going? Put it into two columns, those that we thought were core processes and those that we thought were not core processes, but we weren't quite sure. So we just still wanted to register them somewhere. And so some you may already start to kind of like see, oh, I know we have a process for that. We just did a startup funds, right? We just did some process for startup funds. But maybe startup funds, as it was brought up by Amy Pace, maybe it needs some more because maybe it gets more competitive or our innovation grants start, growing out. So maybe that's one, or maybe new schools, as we heard today, that with the CSP grant, we may need to look at our timeline for new school approval. And so maybe that's a process that our board, I've only pointed two out just to get you started, and I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to let Marie continue to facilitate. And then not core processes, but yet still kind of important. We've talked about having fee-based services. We may not quite be there yet, especially with all that stuff in the left-hand column, but nonetheless, we can provide services and charge for those services, but we have zero process for that at this time. So without further ado, if you want to keep help facilitating, or if the board just wants to engage and just give us your response to this.
And I would say too, looking at this, if you feel like more things should be, in like maybe instead of having new and satellite and expansion, like maybe you want that all wrapped up into one process, like, we could look at doing that. If there are things you want to see broken apart. I know on some of the not core, we had put, yet, but now with moving, maybe some of those pieces need to move over. So really, it's just kind of prompting that conversation, or if you feel like we're on the right track and want to direct staff to keep going, we'll chair goals. We'll take whatever direction you and the board would like to provide.
Okay, instead of us being formal and just raising hands, this kind of it feels like more of a brainstorming thing to me. So how about if we just speak and discuss? So as at your will, just go ahead and comment on any of those. Can you see all of them? But you can see okay, Rebecca, all right?
I feel like I need to raise my hand, even though
You don't need to raise your hand. Just
kind of it's a classroom.
One board member said they have the red pen ready to go, and another one's.
please go ahead.
One thing I would love to see, and maybe this isn't a core process, but because it's statutory and because I think with our new innovation specialist, and also it's something we haven't always done well, though we've wanted to, I think it's been a desire, is identifying and sharing innovation, successful innovations among charter schools and throughout the whole education system, because it's not that's actually something we're supposed to do in statute.
Yes.
And we sometimes do a spotlight or something like that. Those are great, but as a charter, leader in a school or an LEA, I don't think I would have. When I did that work, I don't think I would have ever known enough about the really good programs that were happening that I could have sought out that school, looked at data, visited maybe, and even thought of implementing something that, seemed to be something that would work for our school. We tweaked it or something. Anyway, I'm just wondering if there isn't, if that isn't something, because the innovation grants are great, right? But I wonder if part of that isn't having a process where we actually, but not just in a check the box way even, but something that somebody else could adopt. If it's that good, knows enough about it, we gather enough information about it.
Innovative best practices.
Well, I'm even thinking, best practices, yes, but the actual innovations.
Okay.
The actual innovations. Was it scheduling? Was it so that you're actually delivering education with an entirely new model? Because you know how we have the pilot programs through the innovation grant. I want to call them pilot programs. It might be the wrong term, but I thought that's what it said. But then also you have schools who are also funding programs on their own, and the USBE has the sandbox and regulation.
Yeah.
deal where you can take a certain amount of your money and redirect it that was restricted even if you've met maintenance of effort and so on. And, you know, I never hear about anything, right? I mean, you know, except sort of maybe after the fact and a little rah-rah, which is great. I'm not criticizing that, but I'm just wondering if that's not, that doesn't sound like that's meeting statute to me.
Good point, because I have 3 USB innovation grants right now, in addition to the state furnace, the little one, and I bet you know nothing about.
I know nothing.
The one with the-
And what if one of them or 2 of them are like, have these just outstanding outcomes for remediation or for, you know, exceptionally high performing students?
or
I'd like to know what you're doing.
What
What was it again? Okay,
Tweaked it, so we could save another school from
Having
doing it and learning from the fact that it wasn't worth the effort.
they say that, I mean, the data has shown that sometimes it takes 20 years in regular education, traditional education systems, to take a research-based idea that has been implemented, so not just the idea, but the application as well, and generalize it through,
Find that for others, yeah.
and 20 years, that's somebody's whole education if they enter kindergarten. And we can jumpstart that. Yeah.
Right, but I think to your point, we can have a process, we can have a more nimble process, we can coordinate with you, lead in that process. I'm a little more generous with us because look at how long it took for hand washing to become normal in the medical community. So I try to be patient with how long it takes.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. But charters are able much more nimbly
And that should be one of our characteristics, something that we can.
within a 5-year period to have something that shows an outcome and is taken up by other schools who are needy of that same outcome or whose model would fit with the pilot model, whatever. I mean, we should be able to cut that down to 1/4 of the time.
And could that even be like teacher or a couple of teachers within a school who are doing something really wonderful that others could duplicate?
Sure.
In ways that they're just, you know, if they just have found a key to doing something that's really successful and others could do that. Sorry, we shouldn't be adding. You've already got a long list.
We
But
wanted it.
I'm going to too, just because we talked about one of the important things, I believe we've talked about, one of the important things that we do, that if every school has a highly functioning board, that if that board is a highly functioning board, the work that we do is around way to go school, keep going, but we don't have to intervene as much. If that board at that school is taking care of things. So I don't know what I'm asking, but maybe around individual school board training and in helping to build individual school boards. And I don't see that in any of those categories necessarily. Maybe it is under one of those, but that's one of the things that we've talked about a lot, that the individual school boards in schools are really the key for things to work.
It's like a prevention
Yeah, if they
medicine
know,
and
they know what to do and
lifestyle.
how to do it well, then they'll take off and they'll exceed everyone's expectations about what can happen, because we can't be in every single school to do that. But if we are sure that the governing body of each school is really tremendous, they take care of themselves. And then, of course, that means directors are going to be part of that too, obviously, but those individual boards who take the responsibility and make sure that they have a great team at the school, all the things that they need to do, financial help and everything else at the individual schools.
Chair Bowles, for that support and technical assistance, if we added like 4 school governing boards and then moved it to the core processes column, would that be the spirit of what you're talking about? Support and technical assistance for.
I'm just thinking around, because we've talked a lot about just around how strong boards make a big difference. And that can be a way that we can help.
Agreed.
Yeah, because some of them are lay folks, lay in the sense of they don't come from education, but they have strong expertise, like we talked about in accountants today. We need good accountants. And if you don't have a board with a good accountant, we maybe should be counseling to say, hey, you've got a hole on this board. you need somebody who knows that, or somebody who understands marketing, or someone who, you know, those kinds of things that educators who know education don't do well on those other kinds of things sometimes. You know, we just don't have that training often to do that. And sometimes we do it just by, you know, we just take to it because it's intuitive or it's something that we do well, but not always. So that's something. I'll wait for a minute. Anybody else? I'm just bringing up things that we've talked about
Mhm.
before, and this is, and not this one is not one that I'm really pushing for because I can't even remember the name of it. But we had talked about individual certifications for things. What did we call that? What do you call that?
Like micro credentials.
Micro credentials. Thank you so much. I couldn't think of the name. But we had talked about doing some of that, and maybe that's an eventual something. Do we really get bang for our buck from doing that, or is it just for show, or you know, it looks good, or you know, it's part of the jargon today? I'm not really someone who just does things because it's the in thing to do, but
A follow-up, could it be conceived as a service that we charge for or no?
you know,
Potentially?
Yeah.
Okay, just a follow-up.
just something.
Yeah.
Especially since for that, if your board is struggling, it, just as with everything else, even if we subsidize it a little bit, you know, in other
Got
words,
it.
charge a small fee,
Sure,
rather than a big one,
sure.
then the board has skin in the game. And
Yep.
one of the hardest parts for getting boards to be trained is that we've offered things and you get like 10 people there from the whole state, even if it's all around the whole
Right.
state. Now we have, you know, virtual, you get maybe 12, you know, but I'm wondering, you know, if you, I remember when a board I worked with years and years ago needed some serious help, was dissolving essentially.
Mm.
The state charter school board under Marlise Burns paid for half of the training, and the school itself paid for half the training for Brian Carpenter to come in. I use this as an example to say that when you pay for half of it and you're poor, you're a school, you're just starting out, you're tiny, you don't have extra money. But so the state charter school board helped, realizing what dire straits the school was in. But the school helped. The school had skin in that game. And I really think that makes a difference. So I don't know, maybe there can be some kind of a balance because you kind of need to help yourself too.
Yep.
But if we're there as experts, our staff, I mean, and can be partners, therefore they really understand the uniqueness of that school, you know, would even be able to sort of be nuanced in the training. I think that could be a really great way to support schools for governance and
And
operations.
it may have to be more than just, we have this training coming up if anyone's interested. We may have to be more proactive than that. But man, if every school had just its dynamite team at each school, you know, then you just let them fly. We don't have to intervene to do that. A lot of these things would be taken care of.
Yeah.
Because they would just they would do it.
Definition of dynamite team instead of.
What do they call it the other day in
It's
one of our
what's-
meetings was the something team. It was the Avenger team or. Yeah.
There's,
Well, to see when you go into some schools and they believe the dynamite teams,
Yeah.
their philosophy
Yeah,
is
yeah.
what they suggest is, and yet you're like, whoa, let's have a hard conversation about
Right.
It almost stuff when you think you're an A. You're really a C.
it.
Right.
That's why you have.
the test comes back. Yeah, you're like, wait.
That's why we have to be more proactive, because if we just say, this is available for you, and there are some who say, oh, I mean, we have teachers who never take advantage of professional development kinds of things, and they say, oh,
I think that's
And
why
actually,
learning
they do.
processes is really critical to defining some of these terms. I have 3 things I've written down. I don't know if they fit on here, and I'm not trying to add to a list that is already, you know, it's a great list, but I have 3 things on my mind. They may not fit here. Support for rural schools, support for micro schools, and high-risk population support. Now, I don't know if that's a process. I don't know what that means, but it just seems like if we're trying to focus on something, just kind of feel like to me the next 10, 20, 25 years of charter school movement is going to try to better help you know, choice in rural Utah. I hope it doesn't have to lag behind choice in urban Utah. And the same with, you know, micro schools. I just think families are, you know, in this world where you can do virtual part-time and you can live remote and you might have to make economics work. Like that's just going to be perhaps a situation. And then of course, I was really touched by that group that came before us that I think we're going to look at again. You know, what they're doing. I know that I just applaud the schools in Utah that are, you know, maybe aiming towards that. I don't know if that's a process. I'm not sure I can describe how maybe those things fit into here. Maybe they're under there, but just mindful of, you know, if we're kind of focusing our support that kind of those three things, those three groups come to me. I don't know.
Can I build on that thought? Because I attended a NACSA. It was during COVID when it was all virtual. So I wasn't at the NACSA conference. But one of the things that NACSA pointed out was how important it is if you have those goals. So I'm thinking of those as goals, you know. Even if in micro schools, I'm going to reframe that to be small schools that are charter, because a lot of the micro schools are going to be funded by the Utah Fits All, and that's kind of outside of our province. But if you want those kinds of nuanced schools to exist where you've mentioned and serving the populations you've mentioned, then NACSA pointed out in this double strand that I attended that charter authorizers actually have to have a process that builds capacity for people in those areas to apply for and then run charters. So if that is in fact our goal, then, and we can see how that fits into the strategic plan, or if that needs to be a change to the strategic plan, then I think that is a process. Because they said what we found is that the people who usually apply for charters have already have quite a capacity, quite an experience, are often not from underserved areas or underserved groups, because that's a whole new thing for them to step into. They haven't naturally been in that world necessarily, and therefore their applications come up short. They have a great idea, they have great desire, great heart, they're willing to work super hard, but they don't have the capacity right then, which is sometimes what we see from people breaking into an area. Intelligent, hardworking people who don't have the experience to put forward a good application or afterward to run that charter. So that if that's something we want, we have to have a process for onboarding that's different from the regular onboarding, and offboarding that's different from the regular offboarding for the running of the school. So anyway, that's what I learned from that NACSA by data.
I actually do think all of these ideas fit in that innovation bucket. I don't think we have to rethink our values.
Okay, very good. That makes me happy.
When you're looking at doing things differently, and one of the key components of innovation is supporting that innovation, right? So if I'm a school that's taking a baby step, or someone who wants to try something new, and I'm a part of a marginalized population that might never attempt it, the framework, the process, right, has to be in place to scaffold that innovation, walk alongside that. And so as I'm hearing this, and actually when I saw the core process list, I think to your point, Marie, like, should we fold these into each other or put them, like, right. I immediately started putting them in buckets, and it is over, you know, the oversight, authorization, innovation, boom, boom, boom. Yeah. And putting these ideas in that innovation bucket, the support has to, you know, link arms with innovation, or it doesn't happen. You're creating this space that innovation or new ideas, small ideas can start to use your incubate, right? Like start to form. So just to add on to what you're saying, I think the space is already there, but the process is missing. You've got a plan, right? We're talking about this.
Can I second Crystal and Director Stephenson's thoughts of rolling that? But my thought on it is when we look at a process, if we write a separate process, we have a tendency to see those things in isolation and we silo them. When we roll them and look at the process as truly a process, we see them in totality. And I think if we break those first couple ones out, especially in the authorizing space, we will silo the movement and growth as opposed to seeing the movement and the growth as a big picture. And we can talk all day long about whether in law or not, we can talk about enrollment. The fact remains that we have to look at authorizing in totality to know those numbers, to know those markets, for us to be able to understand what's feasible. Because I believe firmly that this board is set up to be kind of that angel investor kind of like mindset of you're coming and asking for a lot of public money. There has to be a gatekeeper to those funds. And we would be irresponsible if we were just doling out money with no thought to the big picture of the work. So I would support the idea of rolling those authorizing processes up into one larger flow and see how they interact with each other. I don't want in January to make decisions not with an eye of what's going to happen in February with the expansions, because they do inform, or they should inform each other. And that was my contention today too. That huge decision will have ramifications on January and February, and it would be foolish for us to pretend like it doesn't. So I would like to support you in that recommendation.
So it's more of a continuum.
Yes, I believe it. And I think it's we made these decisions, now that reduces, or we made this market is now. So if the satellite comes, that market just took 1,800 kids out of it. Are you sure you can support an expansion, right? Because I think fiscal responsibility is one of our hallmarks.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. And that's why, I made my comment. I'm not as articulate as I think the rest of you, but I would do well. I don't mean to get us off in the weeds, but just kind of understanding this in the context of kind of our legal guidance, right? This idea that we shouldn't look left or right in making decisions, that's not what the law says, but that's my thought. It's just very difficult to me. I'm just wrestling with that. Like, I feel kind of shackled when I don't really want to be. But I understand there's another side of that may work. So again, I don't want to get outside of a discussion that's kind of centered around processes, but I think this is all, it should be additive versus silent.
I agree with that. And just about that too, the law isn't supposed to shackle us because we actually, as part of the process of authorizing, have to have a good market study from any school coming forward. That is part of it too. It even says that in statute. But what it also says is that we have a really good idea that's come into an area where a market analysis has been done where the parents want this school. What we're not supposed to do is not authorize it because the district doesn't want us to, or another charter says that might take my students. So there's a difference between saying we're not supposed to look left or right as that's something that once these other criteria have been met, like the market analysis, that we're not supposed to let prohibit us from considering it. There's a very big difference there.
That's why I think on Daybreak, it was so fascinating. They would say Daybreak, who wouldn't want to build a charter school in Daybreak? And I'm thinking, lots of people do. That's why they built them. And the one is just outside of Daybreak. I mean, it's not technically on Daybreak's land, but you could spit on it from Daybreak, right? So, that said to me, like, okay, I can't think about how if you opened this school, you might pull kids from those two schools. But I am going to think about, I've got two really established schools that don't have a lot of turnover in any area and are very, very well liked. And you're going to try to go and compete. And the only area that you have, your school is going to be facing those schools. So I just thought that was interesting. I think we do have a responsibility to look to, I can't worry about their enrollment. I can't worry about Jordan's enrollment, but I really better worry about your enrollment.
Absolutely. Now, and supposedly though, it wasn't presented to us, but supposedly they did have a market analysis for that area. They've had to pull out of that area. So that would have informed us, right? That would have let us know whether or not there were still people in that area that wanted that. But
well, and trusting a developer also.
But they did their own market analysis. Yeah.
Like in generality, like where did your information come? But I just think in the process, we have to be careful not to silo those processes so that we can see it as a total aggregate, like what's happening there. So,
Sure, I agree with that.
I appreciate you already, wanting to do that.
I have another thought on a process, and I don't even know what it would be called, because I think that calling it what I'm thinking, which is sort of an emergency process, is too, I don't sort of, it doesn't fit all of the circumstances because emergencies are again on a continuum. But anywhere from, there are quite a few processes that, or there are things that happen, whether they are sort of, acts of God, so to speak, or just things we decide as a board, like to recommend a school for closure, for instance, that create very difficult and unexpected circumstances for schools. I'm thinking of a director who passed. Okay, I look at Marie because she and I went up to that school many times. And when you have these situations, you actually don't have leaders in place, no matter how good they are, who have an ability like, oh, I've closed 7 schools. Let me just close another one, right? You don't have people with the experience, and you don't have people who even anticipated. And often what you have are leaders, whether administrators or board members, who in crisis like that, sometimes you have them step away. So you're even at more of a loss as to how to accomplish something. So I'm wondering if we don't have a process that includes not just our staff, but other groups who are willing, as for instance, in the case of the director who passed, not only was the state charter school board up there, but the association, UAPCS, was up there. We also had Academica West, who volunteered time, much as they have volunteered time to our organization for the financial analysis or whatnot. So my point is, I wonder if in advance of a crisis, like in advance of any of these things, you have people who have said, I would be willing to help in the event of an acute situation of some kind, because a black eye on any charter is a black eye on the whole charter world. And in a situation where that's acute, even if it means that a school has taken a motion to close itself, let's say we haven't even closed, but they're in financial straits, they're horrible, they go ahead and they close themselves. They then need not people to pull back, but people to actually step in, right, to help with that, with what comes next, which very few people understand. So what I'm saying is, I think it would be very good to anticipate and set up an emergency group that can come in under the leadership of the state charter school board staff and support for a week, a few months, whatever it may be, and then even hand off and say, now, we've gotten you started. This is a group that you could employ to do this, or another group that you could seek. But the point is, those situations aren't always, I mean, they're temporary. How long they are, it's hard to say, but they are always temporary. But they're usually very acute, and maybe those are the situations where our schools need more support than they need in any other situation. So I would like that. I want to call it an emergency support process, or some nicer name if that one's horrible.
So have some data that we collected and has never been put anywhere from both that school as well as some of our other schools that experience some crisis or death of directors or things.
Yeah.
Asking like what was
Crisis
helpful,
support. I like
what
that.
was not helpful.
Mhm.
This was a hard situation a few months later when people could talk about data, but we've got that data collected. It just hasn't gone anywhere. So that would be something where we could use that to also help inform.
And we also have drafts of at least kind of steps for closure that are detailed based on our schools that have closed, which we can draw on as well. And then other things that we've done, right? We have what I want to call at least drafts of templates for those kind of things, just based on the state charter school board staff's experience. And so if we collected that and standardized that, always, improving it, as we would never hope for horrible things to happen. But I do like that idea of crisis support.
What a tremendous, comes out of our values of compassion.
Yeah.
Right. Just flows, right. So it's not just we have compassion, but this is how process driven we can show our compassion.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Well, this was way more than what we had hoped. It was so good.
You asked to
Yeah. Wow.
You should
No,
come to expect
I
that
meant
now.
to say that in a good way. It was tremendous, genuine, authentic input. And it was so good. I mean, I think we, at least I noticed we could do more of that with our board, is to get your values and your expertise and your things. So that was
Thanks for asking.
tremendous. Yeah.
Good discussion.
Yeah.
And we don't need to take any action relative to that.
No, I think that gives us. good-
Just gave us
good-
an opportunity to discuss, and thank you for that opportunity. We're at our last item. Anything else that anyone needed to bring up before we conclude? I just want to remind, of course, that our next meeting is November 14th. Between now and November 14th, at our next meeting, Thursday, November 14th, I think we'll be back here again on November 14th. That some individuals from our team, the full team, including the board as part of that team, will be at the NACSA convention. And we'll see some of you on October 21st when that begins. I'm not even sure who's there, who's gonna be there.
Yeah, can I have the dates again? I should.
And you should have received your Emily. Have not. You're welcome.
Say no highways. And we're gonna go find some rustic room to stay in.
Very plain.
Yes. As have I.
It's gonna
I
come
have to.
backwards to get there.
Yeah.
Let's see, we have, Linda Biesinger, and then we have Lisa. And then Chair Bowles, Member Olson, Member Spiker, and Amy, and then Dr. Kramer, and myself.
Okay, all right.
And we
What-
have dates, I believe,
Is it from Melissa
yes.
Harrington?
Well, if I,
Linnea?
Couple of red eyes.
Yes, that's the name. But that's the right.
yeah.
Sorry. It's better than driving
So
though.
those who are going, we'll see you at the Salt Lake Airport on October 21st, and we'll take good notes and come back and report to the full group about what we saw and learned. On November 14th, which is our next meeting. And so one of our agenda items should be a report on that, so we can share
Yeah, that would
on
be great.
November 14th.
That'd be
what
awesome.
we learned during that time. All right, we have come to the end of our scheduled agenda. And I think we don't even need, unless I'm hearing objections, a motion. I can just say we call this meeting adjourned. Until
you.
November 14th.
Thank you.
See you then. It's good.
Did you
Open
see
up
my
the
eyes?
blinds.
I know. We always look at each other now.